When the blood wouldn't wash off her hands, Dr. Vera Montgomery knew her old life was over. She stood in the cramped bathroom of a westbound freight train, watching pink water spiral down the drain. The fluorescent light above her head flickered with the rhythm of steel wheels on track, casting shadows that made her look like a stranger. Maybe that's what she was now, a stranger to herself, a stranger to the world that wanted her dead. Her hands, surgeons' hands that had saved hundreds of lives over a decade of emergency rooms and operating theaters, wouldn't stop shaking. She'd performed a craniotomy in a moving helicopter once during a hurricane evacuation. She'd reattached a severed artery while standing in 6 inches of floodwater. She'd worked 30-hour shifts without her hands trembling even once. But now they shook. Because steady hands didn't matter when the world called you a murderer. Through the thin bathroom door, Vera could hear them, heavy boots on metal flooring, the crackle of radio static, men's voices speaking in the clipped, efficient tones of federal agents who believed they were hunting a killer. Check every compartment. She boarded in Denver. She's on this train. Vera's reflection stared back at her from the spotted mirror. 34 years old, but looking 40 after 3 days of running. Her dark hair, usually pinned back in a neat bun for surgery, hung in damp strands against her neck. Her eyes, brown and steady, now carried the hunted look of prey that knows the wolves are close. She reached into her medical bag, the only possession she'd managed to grab when the police came for her, and pulled out a scalpel. The blade caught the light. Sharp. Precise. She'd used instruments like this to save Harrison Whitmore's life 3 weeks ago, or at least she'd tried. The door handle rattled. "Federal agents, open up." Vera's mind calculated options with the same methodical precision she used in the operating room. The window was too small. The door was the only exit. And she was trapped 40 feet above ground on a train moving 60 miles per hour through the Colorado wilderness. She slipped the scalpel up her sleeve and flushed the toilet to buy seconds. Then she opened the door. The FBI agent standing there was young, maybe 28, with the eager eyes of someone who believed catching fugitives would make him a hero. His hand rested on his service weapon. Behind him, the train corridor stretched like a tunnel with nowhere to run. "Ma'am, I need to see some identification." Vera's voice came out steady, despite the hammering of her heart. "Of course, it's in my bag." She reached slowly into her medical bag, watching the agent's eyes track her movement. Her fingers found not identification, but a vial of sedative. The same sedative that someone had tampered with to kill Harrison Whitmore while he lay on her operating table. The same sedative that had destroyed her career, her reputation, and her freedom in the space of one failed surgery. But she couldn't use it. Assaulting a federal agent would only prove what they already believed about her. So instead, she pulled out her wallet and handed over the fake ID she'd purchased 2 days ago in a Denver bus station from a man who asked no questions. The agent studied it, frowned, looked at her face, looked back at the ID. "This says you're Sarah Patterson, from Oregon." "That's right." "Can you explain why Sarah Patterson has a medical bag full of surgical instruments?" Vera met his eyes without flinching. "I'm a veterinarian, large animals. These are my tools." It was a good lie. It might have even worked. But then the train lurched as it began to slow for the next station, and the agent's radio crackled to life. "All units, suspect spotted in rear compartment. Dark hair, brown eyes, mid-30s, carrying a leather medical bag. Approach with caution. Suspect may be armed." The agent's hand moved to his weapon. Vera moved faster. She grabbed her medical bag and shoved past him, using her shoulder with the full force of desperation. The agent stumbled backward. Vera ran. The train was slowing, but not stopped. Through the windows, she could see a small mountain town sliding into view. Wooden buildings, weathered gray by altitude and time. A single main street. Mountains rising like walls on all sides. The sign on the station platform read, "Copper Ridge. Population 847. Elevation 8,200 feet. Vera didn't care about the population or the elevation. She cared only that the train was slowing enough for her to jump. She hit the door release and stumbled out onto the metal steps between cars. Wind whipped her hair. The ground blurred past, still moving too fast, but slowing with every second. Behind her, the agent shouted, "Stop, federal agent!" Vera jumped. She hit the gravel beside the tracks, hard rolling to absorb the impact, the way she'd been taught in a self-defense class she'd taken years ago and never thought she'd need. Rocks tore through her clothes. Her medical bag flew from her hands and skidded 10 feet away. She scrambled to her feet, grabbed the bag, and ran. The train shrieked to a full stop behind her. Doors opened. Men in dark suits poured out like ants from a disturbed hill. Vera ran toward the only cover available, a weathered water tower at the edge of the station platform. She pressed herself against the old wood, breathing hard, her ribs aching from the jump. From this vantage point she could see the entire town. Copper Ridge looked like something preserved in amber from another century. No traffic lights, no chain stores, just a handful of buildings clustered around a dirt main street with wilderness pressing in from all sides like the town was barely holding back the forest. An FBI sedan rolled into town from the north, its presence alien and threatening, in this place that time seemed to have forgotten. Vera's options were running out. The main street was 50 yards away, but might as well have been 50 miles. The agents would see her the moment she left cover. The wilderness beyond town offered no sanctuary to someone who'd spent her entire adult life in cities and hospitals. Then she heard it, the low rumble of an engine, different from the FBI sedan, older, rougher. A beat-up pickup truck, more rust than paint, pulled up to the station. The driver cut the engine and sat for a moment as if deciding whether whatever errand brought him here was worth the effort. Vera watched as he finally climbed out. The man was tall, maybe 6'2", with the lean, hard build of someone who'd spent his life doing physical work. He wore dark jeans and a black shirt, both faded from washing. A black jacket despite the mild afternoon temperature. His face was weathered in a way that made it hard to guess his age. Could be 35, could be 45. Hard living made those years blur together, but it was the scar that caught her attention. A thick line running from his left temple down across his jaw, the kind of scar that came from violence survived rather than accidents endured. What struck Vera most, though, was the reaction of the townspeople. The few people visible on the main street, maybe a dozen in total, all found somewhere else to be the moment the man appeared. A woman gathering her 2 children close and hurrying into the general store. An old man on a bench who suddenly remembered an urgent appointment elsewhere. A shopkeeper who'd been sweeping his porch retreating inside and locking the door. The man in black noticed but didn't seem to care. He moved with the calm, unhurried stride of someone who'd long ago accepted that people feared him and decided their fear wasn't his problem. The FBI agent from the train approached him. "Excuse me, sir. We're looking for a woman. Dark hair, brown eyes, mid-30s, might be injured from jumping off the train. Have you seen anyone matching that description?" The man in black looked at the agent with pale gray eyes that gave away nothing. "No." Just that. One word. Final as a door closing. The agent's jaw tightened. "Sir, this is a federal investigation. A dangerous fugitive." The man in black reached into his jacket. The agent's hand flew to his weapon, but what emerged wasn't a gun. It was a small, worn leather notebook. The man flipped it open, scanned a page, then looked back at the agent. "Agent Marcus Riley, badge number 73492. You owe the Carmichael family $8,000 from your daughter's car accident last year. Medical bills. The family paid up front when your insurance denied the claim. They've been trying to collect for 11 months. I'm handling the case now." The agent's face went white. "How did you—" "I'm a debt collector. I investigate. I verify. I collect." The man's voice was flat, emotionless. "And right now you're standing on my time discussing your work when you should be discussing your debt. Would you like to handle this now, or should I contact your supervisor?" The agent's hand dropped from his weapon. He looked around as if hoping for backup, but the other FBI agents were spreading out through town, searching buildings. I'll call you to set up a payment plan." "You do that." The man in black closed his notebook. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." He turned and started walking toward his truck. Vera made a decision born from desperation and the strange magnetic pull of opportunity. She stepped out from behind the water tower and walked directly toward him. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was insane. That approaching a man who terrified FBI agents was the opposite of smart. That she should run for the wilderness and take her chances with bears in mountains rather than with human predators. But Vera had learned something. In a decade of emergency medicine, sometimes the most dangerous option was also the only option. Sometimes you had to cut deeper to save the patient. Sometimes you had to make the bold play because the cautious one led to death. The man in black noticed her approach. His hand didn't move toward a weapon, but his entire posture shifted into something coiled and ready. "I need to hire you," Vera said. He looked at her for a long moment, those pale gray eyes taking in everything. The torn clothes from her jump off the train, the medical bag she clutched like a lifeline, the desperation she couldn't quite hide. "I don't take charity cases," he said. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm offering a trade. I don't need anything." Vera glanced at the truck behind him, at the driver's seat, at the dark stain on the worn upholstery that her trained eye recognized immediately. "Yes, you do. You need someone who can keep a bullet wound from getting infected." The man's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those gray eyes. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. "You're observant," he said. "I'm a surgeon. I notice blood. And I notice when someone's favoring their left side because they've been shot and the wound is maybe 3-4 days old." Vera took a breath. "I can help you. Clean the wound. Stitch it properly. Make sure you don't die from sepsis in the next 36 hours. In exchange, you get me out of this town." In the distance, FBI agents were going door to door, showing her photo. The net was tightening. The man in black studied her face. "Who are you running from?" "Everyone." "Good." Something that might have been approval crossed his features. "So am I." He glanced toward the FBI agents, then back at her, made a decision. "Get in the truck." Vera didn't hesitate. She climbed into the passenger seat, her medical bag on her lap. The man in black slid behind the wheel, started the engine, pulled away from the station with the same unhurried calm he'd shown throughout their entire interaction. They passed an FBI agent on the street corner. The agent glanced at the truck but didn't stop them. Just another local in another rust bucket vehicle. Nothing worth investigating. 3 blocks later, when they were clear of the main street and heading north on a dirt road that disappeared into pine forest, the man spoke again. "My name is Jackson Reeves. People call me Jack, or they call me worse things. Either way works. Vera Montgomery." She saw no point in hiding it. If he wanted to turn her in, he would. If he didn't, knowing her real name wouldn't change that. "The surgeon who killed Harrison Whitmore," Jack said. Not a question. "The surgeon who tried to save him. Someone else killed him, but I'm the one they're blaming." Jack drove in silence for a minute, the truck bouncing over ruts in the dirt road. Around them, pine trees pressed close, creating a green tunnel that blocked out most of the afternoon sun. "You have proof?" he finally asked. "Had. It was destroyed." "Then you're in trouble." "I'm aware." Another mile passed. The road got rougher. Vera could see Jack favoring his left side, the way he held himself just slightly twisted to avoid putting pressure on the wound she knew was there. "How bad is it?" she asked, nodding toward his side. "Bad enough." "You need antibiotics." "When was the last time you changed the dressing?" "Haven't." Vera closed her eyes briefly. "You're lucky you're not dead already." "People keep telling me that." The road finally opened into a small clearing. A cabin sat at the center log construction with a stone chimney and a covered porch. Small, but well-maintained. Functional rather than comfortable. Behind it, a lean-to stable housed a single horse. Beyond that, mountains rose into a sky turning amber with approaching sunset. Jack stopped the truck and killed the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. "Inside," he finally said. "We'll deal with this before I pass out, which will be soon." The cabin's interior matched the exterior. Functional, sparse, a wood stove, a table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with supplies organized with military precision, and on the walls, maps, dozens of them, topographical maps of the surrounding mountains, county maps marked with roads and towns, and one entire wall covered with papers that Vera realized with growing understanding were contracts. Debt collection contracts, hundreds of them, names and amounts and payment schedules all meticulously documented. "Sit," Vera said, her surgeon's authority taking over. "Take off your shirt." Jack complied, wincing, as he pulled the fabric away from the wound. Underneath his torso was lean muscle and scar tissue. This wasn't his first time being shot. It probably wasn't even his fifth. But this wound was fresh and angry and showing the early signs of infection that would kill him if left untreated. Vera opened her medical bag, grateful that she'd restocked it just days before everything fell apart. She had antibiotics, antiseptic, sutures, everything she needed. "This is going to hurt," she said. "It already hurts." She cleaned the wound with antiseptic, watching his face for signs of shock. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just stared at the ceiling with those pale eyes while she worked. "Who shot you?" Vera asked, partly to distract him, partly because she needed to know what kind of man she'd just tied her fate to. Someone who thought a debt could be paid in blood. Was he right? "No, I don't kill. I just collect what's owed." Vera pulled out the bullet with forceps. It had lodged against a rib, missing the lung by maybe half an inch. Pure luck that he was still breathing. "You collect debts by getting shot?" she asked. "Sometimes the debtors disagree with the collection process." "Violently, apparently." "Violently," Jack agreed. She irrigated the wound, started stitching. Her hands, which had shaken on the train, were steady now. This was what she knew. This was what she'd trained her entire adult life to do. In the familiar rhythm of surgery, even in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, under impossible circumstances, Vera felt almost like herself again. "You're going to need antibiotics," she said, "twice daily for 10 days, and you need to keep this clean and dry." "I know the drill. How many times have you been shot?" "Enough to have a drill." Vera tied off the final suture and sat back. "You're lucky. Another inch to the right, and you'd have bled out before you made it home." Jack slowly pulled his shirt back on his face, tight with pain. "People keep telling me I'm lucky. I'm starting to think they don't know what the word means." He stood swaying slightly and moved to a cabinet, pulled out a bottle and 2 glasses, poured amber liquid into both. "Whiskey," he offered. "I'm technically on the run from the FBI. Why not?" Vera took the glass. They drank in silence. The whiskey burned going down, cutting through the adrenaline crash that Vera could feel coming like a wave about to break. Finally, Jack spoke. "You said you wanted a trade. I'm guessing you didn't just mean medical care for a ride out of town." "No," Vera admitted. "I need more than that." "How much more?" "The FBI will canvass this town by morning. They'll check every cabin, every shed, every possible hiding place. They'll have my photo, my description, my medical history, everything." Vera met his eyes. "I can't just hide. I need a reason to be here. A legitimate reason that won't raise questions." Jack was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down his glass and pulled something from his pocket. A ring. Simple gold band. Worn but solid. "My mother's," he said. "She died 2 years ago. I kept it because—" He trailed off as if the reason didn't matter anymore. He held it out to Vera. "As far as anyone in Copper Ridge knows, you're my wife. You've lived here for 5 years. We keep to ourselves. Don't socialize. Don't explain ourselves. People learned a long time ago not to ask me questions." Vera stared at the ring. "Why would you do this? You don't know me. I could be guilty. I could be dangerous." "Could be." Jack's expression was unreadable. "But 10 years ago, a doctor saved my life in a field hospital in Bosnia. Mine collapsed during a peacekeeping mission. I was patient 47, just a number on a chart. The doctor had brown eyes and steady hands. Worked for 18 hours straight, pulling survivors out of critical condition." He paused. "She gave me another decade of life. Maybe more. I'm just returning the favor." Vera's breath caught. She remembered Bosnia. Remembered the mine collapse. Remembered working until her hands cramped and her vision blurred, saving whoever could be saved. She didn't remember patient 47 specifically. There had been too many patients, too much blood, too much death. But he remembered her. "I don't know what to say," Vera whispered. "Say yes or say no. FB, I will be here by dawn either way." Vera looked at the ring. At this man who'd been a stranger 15 minutes ago and was now offering her the only lifeline she had. She thought about Harrison Whitmore dying on her operating table while his son watched with satisfaction. Thought about the police arresting her while she still wore her surgical scrubs, blood still on her hands. Thought about 3 days of running with nowhere to run to. And she thought about what her mother had told her once years ago. Sometimes the only way forward is through the door you never wanted to open. Yes, Vera said. Jack slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit almost perfectly. Welcome to Copper Ridge, Mrs. Reeves, he said. Try not to get us both killed. The first test came at dawn. Vera woke on a narrow cot in the cabin's single bedroom, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Jack had insisted she take the bed while he slept in a chair by the wood stove rifle across his lap. Through the small window, she could see the sun just beginning to paint the mountains gold. And she could see the dust cloud rising from the road. Multiple vehicles coming fast. They're here, Jack said from the doorway. He'd already dressed, already prepared. Remember, you're my wife. You've lived here 5 years. We don't answer questions we don't want to answer. Vera stood trying to smooth her rumpled clothes. What do I say when they ask? You say as little as possible. Let me talk. The vehicle's 3 FBI sedans and a local sheriff's truck pulled into the clearing with the aggressive confidence of law enforcement convinced they're about to close a case. Agent Riley stepped out first, flanked by 2 other agents and a weathered man in a sheriff's uniform who looked uncomfortable with the entire situation. Jack walked out onto the porch. Vera stood behind him, trying to project the calm confidence of someone who belonged there. Help you gentlemen with something, Jack asked. Mr. Reeves, Agent Riley said, we're conducting a search for a fugitive who was last seen in Copper Ridge yesterday afternoon. We have reason to believe she may be hiding in one of the outlying properties. Don't have many neighbors out here, Jack said. It's just me and my wife. Riley's eyes cut to Vera, studied her face, compared it mentally to the photo he'd been carrying. Ma'am, I'm Agent Riley with the FBI. I need to see some identification. Vera felt her heart hammering, but kept her face neutral. Of course, let me get my purse. She turned to go inside, but Riley's voice stopped her. Ma'am, I'll need you to retrieve it while remaining in view. Translation. I don't trust you not to run. Vera went to the table by the door where Jack had placed a purse she'd never seen before. Inside, she found a driver's license with her photo, but a different name, Sarah Reeves. Address, Copper Ridge, Colorado. The license looked real because it was real. Jack must have had contacts who could produce documents on short notice. She handed it to Riley. He examined it thoroughly. Too thoroughly. Compared the photo to her face multiple times. This says you're Sarah Reeves. That's right. And you've lived at this address for how long? 5 years, next month. Interesting. Because we have a report that Jackson Reeves lives alone. Has lived alone since his mother died 2 years ago. Vera felt the trap closing, but before she could respond, the sheriff stepped forward. Agent Riley, that report is outdated, the sheriff said. His name tag read Donnelly. He was maybe 60, with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much and cared too little. Jack here did live alone until about 5 years ago when he brought Sarah home from Denver. They married quiet-like. Most folks around here don't even know because Jack keeps to himself. Riley's jaw tightened. Sheriff, this is a federal investigation, and this is my county, Donnelly said mildly. I know everyone in it, including Jack and Sarah Reeves. Now you want to search the cabin, you're welcome to, but you're not going to find your fugitive here because she ain't here. The 2 men stared at each other, a battle of jurisdictions and wills. Finally, Riley gestured to his agents. Search it. They went through the cabin with the thoroughness of people trained to find hidden compartments and secret rooms. They checked under floorboards, behind furniture, in the lean-to stable and the small root cellar. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. When they emerged 20 minutes later, Riley's frustration was evident. Clean, one agent reported. Riley turned back to Vera. Ma'am, where were you yesterday afternoon? Here, doing laundry, preparing dinner, the usual. Can anyone verify that? Just my husband. Like the sheriff said, we keep to ourselves. Riley pulled out a photo, the wanted poster. Vera's face stared back at her from glossy paper. You're telling me you don't recognize this woman? Vera looked at the photo, at her own face labeled as a murderer. Felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. No, she said. Should I? She's a fugitive, wanted for murder, last seen in Copper Ridge yesterday. Then I hope you find her, Vera said, but she's not here. Riley held her gaze for a long, tense moment. Vera didn't look away, didn't blink. She'd stared down hospital administrators and insurance executives and grieving families who wanted someone to blame. She could stare down an FBI agent. Finally, Riley stepped back. "If you see or hear anything, we'll be sure to let you know," Jack said. The agents climbed back into their vehicles, but before they drove away, Riley rolled down his window. "Mr. Reeves, I'll be in touch about that debt we discussed." "I'll be waiting," Jack said. They watched the vehicles disappear down the road, dust settling in their wake. Sheriff Donnelly was the last to leave. He paused beside his truck, looking at Jack with something that might have been respect or might have been pity. "You're playing a dangerous game, Jack." "Just helping my wife," Jack said. "Sure you are." Donnelly climbed into his truck, then paused. "For what it's worth, I don't much care for the FBI, and I don't much care what you do long as it doesn't make problems for my county. But if those agents come back and find out you've been lying, then I'll handle it," Jack said. Donnelly nodded slowly. "I expect you will." He drove away, leaving Jack and Vera standing in the clearing as morning light burned off the last of the mist. Vera's legs suddenly felt weak. The adrenaline that had carried her through the interrogation drained away, leaving her hollow. "How did you—" she started. "The license I have contacts, people who owe me, or people I've helped who remember favors." Jack's expression was unreadable. "And Sheriff Donnelly, he's a practical man. He doesn't ask questions because he doesn't want answers that would require him to act. He lied for you. He lied for himself. Having the FBI crawling all over his county asking questions, making problems, that's the last thing he wants. Easier to vouch for me and make them go away." Vera sat down on the porch steps, her hands shaking again now that the danger had passed. "They'll come back." "Yes. And eventually they'll figure it out. Maybe," Jack sat beside her, "or maybe they'll decide you got away, disappeared into the wilderness, died out there somewhere. Cases go cold, trails go dead, life goes on." "Is that what you think will happen?" "No," Jack said honestly. "I think eventually the truth will come out, one way or another. But between now and then, you're safe here. As safe as anywhere." Vera looked at the ring on her finger. Her mother's ring had been platinum with a small diamond. This ring was simple gold, worn smooth by years of wear. It felt heavier than it should. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked quietly. "The truth." Jack was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it before. "Because I know what it's like to be blamed for something that wasn't entirely your fault. To have a whole town look at you and see only the worst version of what happened." He paused. "And because that doctor in Bosnia, patient 47, she could have left me to die. Plenty of others did, but she stayed. She fought. She gave me a second chance at life." He looked at Vera. "Maybe it's time I gave someone else that same chance." They sat in silence as the sun climbed higher, painting the pine trees gold and green. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried. The mountain wind whispered through branches. And Vera Montgomery, fugitive surgeon and accidental wife, made a choice. She chose to stay, not because she was trapped, though she was, not because she had nowhere else to go, though she didn't, but because for the first time since Harrison Whitmore died on her operating table, someone believed her. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to build something on. Even if that something was a lie told to survive. Even if that lie might eventually destroy them both. 3 weeks passed in the cabin like time moving underwater. Slow, suspended, strange. Vera learned the rhythm of mountain living the way she'd once learned the rhythm of emergency rooms. Wake before dawn, start the fire, make coffee strong enough to strip paint. Jack would already be outside chopping wood or checking the horse or doing one of 100 small tasks that kept survival possible this far from civilization. Breakfast was silent, not uncomfortable silence, just the quiet of two people who'd learned that words weren't always necessary. Then the work began. Vera helped Jack with his ledgers, her surgeon's precision, useful for tracking debts and payments. She was good with numbers, had always been good with patterns. The work was morally gray in ways that made her uncomfortable, but she understood it. Someone borrowed money, someone else expected repayment. Jack was the mechanism that made that happen. What surprised her was how often Jack forgave debts, wrote them off, gave extensions that his contracts didn't require. "You're terrible at being a ruthless debt collector," she told him one afternoon while reviewing a file. "I collect what people can pay," Jack said, "not what will destroy them." "That's not very profitable." "No, but I can sleep at night." Vera thought about that, about the choice to value sleep over profit. It said something about who Jack Reeves actually was beneath the scar and the reputation. In the evenings, Jack taught her to shoot. The rifle felt wrong in her hands at first. She was trained to save lives, not end them. But Jack's logic was sound. Out here, knowing how to shoot might save your life someday. Animal or human, the principle is the same. You need to be able to protect yourself. So Vera learned how to sight down the barrel, how to breathe and squeeze rather than pull, how to compensate for wind and distance. She missed more than she hit, but she was getting better. Late at night, when Jack thought she was asleep, Vera would hear him working, the scratch of pen on paper, the rustle of documents. She didn't ask what he was doing. Some instinct told her to let him have his secrets the same way he let her have hers. They were becoming partners in this strange charade, husband and wife on paper, allies in survival, something more complicated than friendship, but less simple than love. The town of Copper Ridge remained hostile. On the rare occasions they went in for supplies, people crossed the street to avoid them. Shopkeepers were curt. Children were pulled away from windows when Jack's truck passed. But Vera noticed something. The hostility toward her was different than the hostility toward Jack. People looked at her with pity, as if they believed she was a prisoner rather than a partner. As if the only reason a woman would stay with Jack Reeves was because she had no choice. It made her angry in ways she didn't fully understand. On a Tuesday morning in late October, 3 weeks and 4 days after Vera had jumped off that train, Jack came inside holding a file folder. "I have a collection to make," he said. "Final payment from the Carmichael family. They've been making installments for 18 months. This is the last one." Vera looked up from the medical journal she'd been reading, one of the few luxuries she'd allowed herself ordered through a catalog under her fake name. "The family that shot you, the same. And you're going to collect from them. It's my job." Jack's voice was neutral, but Vera saw the tension in his shoulders. This wasn't just another collection. This was personal. "I'm coming with you," she said. "That's not necessary." "It's absolutely necessary. They shot you once. I'd like to make sure they don't finish the job." Jack almost smiled. "You think you can stop a man with a gun? I think I can stitch you up if he shoots you again. Which means you might survive long enough to regret not bringing me." This time Jack did smile. Small, brief, but real. "Get your coat," he said. The drive to the Carmichael ranch took 40 minutes on roads that barely deserved the name. Jack drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on his thigh. Relaxed. But Vera could see the way his eyes constantly scanned the landscape, looking for threats, planning escape routes, always calculating, always ready. "Tell me about them," Vera said. "The Carmichaels." Jack was quiet for a moment. "Thomas Carmichael is 55, rancher, 3rd generation on that land. His wife Margaret is a retired lawyer. They had one son, Danny, good kid by all accounts, smart, headed to college on a scholarship," had Vera noted, past tense. "Danny died 2 years ago, car accident. He was 18. And they blame you." "They blame me because 6 months before the accident, I repossessed their truck. They were behind on payments. I gave warnings, extensions, but eventually the contract required repossession." Jack's jaw tightened. Danny didn't have a car after that. So the night of the accident, he borrowed his friend's car, took a mountain road too fast in the rain, crashed through a guardrail, died on impact. Vera understood immediately. They think if he'd had his own car, he wouldn't have needed to borrow one, wouldn't have been on that road, wouldn't have died. "Yes." "Do you think that—" Jack's hands tightened on the wheel. "I think Danny made a choice. A bad one. And I think his parents are looking for someone to blame because blaming their dead son is too painful. But you blame yourself anyway?" Jack didn't answer. He didn't need to. The Carmichael Ranch appeared around a bend in the road. Once prosperous, now showing signs of neglect. Fences needed mending. Paint was peeling. The main house sagged slightly as if the grief inside had physical weight. A man stood on the porch watching them approach. Thomas Carmichael, weathered face, gray hair, eyes that had seen too much and forgiven too little. Jack parked the truck and climbed out. Vera followed. "Mr. Carmichael," Jack said, "I'm here for the final payment." Thomas's face hardened. "You've got some nerve showing up here." "I'm just doing my job, sir." "Your job." Thomas's voice dripped with bitterness. "Your job killed my boy." The front door opened and a woman emerged. Margaret Carmichael, 50s, gray-streaked dark hair pulled back, lawyer's eyes that missed nothing. "Thomas," she said quietly, "we discussed this." "I don't care what we discussed. This man took everything from us." Jack's expression didn't change. "The final payment is $12,000. Per the contract, payment is due today." "I'm not giving you a damn thing." Vera saw Thomas's hand drift toward his belt, saw the gun holstered there, made a decision. She stepped forward, placing herself between Jack and Thomas. "Mr. Carmichael," she said, her voice carrying the calm authority she'd used in emergency rooms when dealing with panicked family members. "My name is Sarah Reeves. I'm a doctor, and I need to tell you something about car accidents." Thomas's hand paused. "I don't want to hear. I've worked trauma for 10 years. I've seen hundreds of car accidents, thousands of injuries. I've held the hands of parents while their children died. I've delivered the news that changes lives forever." Vera met his eyes. "Your son's death was not Mr. Reeves's fault. He took our car," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "Danny needed—" "Your son was driving 90 miles per hour on a mountain road in the rain," Vera said, not unkindly, but with unshakable certainty. "The accident report is public record. I read it. The road was wet. Visibility was poor. He wasn't wearing a seatbelt. He lost control on a curve." "Because he didn't know the car," Thomas shouted. "Because it wasn't his car. Because this bastard. Because your son made a choice." Vera's voice was gentle but firm. "A bad choice. A tragic choice. But his choice. Not Mr. Reeves's choice." Margaret made a sound, half sob, half gasp. "We know," she whispered. "God help us, we know." Thomas turned to his wife, confusion and pain warring on his face. Margaret's eyes were wet. "We've always known, Thomas. Danny was driving too fast. He always drove too fast. We warned him, begged him. But he was 18 and immortal, and he thought nothing bad could ever happen to him." "Then why?" Thomas's voice cracked. "Why did you let me blame?" "Because I needed you to blame someone." Margaret's voice broke completely. "Because if you were angry at Jack Reeves, you weren't angry at Danny. You weren't angry at me for not stopping him from going out that night. You weren't angry at yourself for not taking his keys. You were just angry. And anger is easier than grief." The silence that followed was so complete that Vera could hear the wind in the pine trees, could hear a horse nickering in the barn, could hear her own heartbeat. Thomas's hand fell away from his gun. He seemed to collapse inward, all the rage that had sustained him, draining away and leaving only the father who'd lost his son. "I shot you," he said to Jack, 3 weeks ago. Waited for you outside Donovan's store, shot you in the side and left you bleeding." "I know," Jack said quietly. "I wanted you dead, wanted you to hurt the way I hurt. I know. Why didn't you press charges? Why didn't you tell the sheriff?" Jack was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than Vera had ever heard it. "Because I understand grief, Mr. Carmichael. I understand what it does to people. Makes them do things they wouldn't normally do. And I understand that sometimes people need someone to blame before they can start to heal." Thomas stared at him. Then slowly he reached into his pocket and pulled out a check. Already written, already signed. $12,000, he said. "Final payment." Jack took the check, looked at it, then without hesitation tore it in half. "We're even," he said. Thomas's eyes went wide. "That's $12,000, yes. Consider it payment for the bullet you put in me, and for 2 years of your grief that I couldn't do anything about." Jack handed the torn check back. "Keep your money, Mr. Carmichael. Use it to fix your ranch, or donate it to a scholarship in Danny's name, or burn it. I don't care, but you don't owe me anything anymore." Margaret started crying, not quiet tears, full body-shaking sobs. Thomas just stared at the torn check in his hands. "I don't understand." "Some debts can't be collected," Jack said. "Some things are worth more than money." He turned to leave. Vera followed. They were almost to the truck when Thomas called out, "Reeves, wait." They turned. Thomas walked toward them, his steps uncertain. When he reached Jack, he extended his hand. "I'm sorry," he said, "for shooting you, for hating you, for blaming you for something that wasn't your fault." Jack took his hand. "I'm sorry for your loss." They stood like that for a moment. Two men who'd been locked in a spiral of blame and grief finally letting go. In the truck driving away, Vera was quiet, processing what she'd just witnessed. "That was $12,000, she finally said. "Yes." "You just forgave $12,000. "Yes." "Jack, that's not how debt collection works." "No," Jack agreed. "But it's how being human works." Vera looked at him, really looked at him. This man who everyone feared, who had a reputation for ruthlessness, who'd just forgiven a debt to people who'd tried to kill him. "You're a terrible debt collector," she said again. This time Jack smiled. "Good thing I'm planning to retire." They drove in comfortable silence for a while, the afternoon sun painting the mountains in shades of amber and gold. Fall was deepening. Soon winter would come with its cold and snow and isolation. But right now, in this moment, everything felt almost peaceful. Then Vera noticed something. "Jack, look at the creek." They were passing the creek that ran parallel to the road for several miles before branching off toward town. Normally it was a pleasant stream, maybe 20 feet wide, running clear over smooth stones. Today it was swollen, muddy, running fast and high. Jack slowed the truck, his expression shifting from relaxed to alert. "That's wrong," he said. "What do you mean? This time of year the creek should be low. We're weeks away from snowmelt. There's been some rain, but nothing that would account for—" He trailed off his eyes, following the creek upstream toward the mountains. Vera felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we need to get to high ground. Now!" Jack turned the truck onto a narrow track that climbed sharply up the mountainside. The vehicle protested engine whining, but Jack pushed it hard. They climbed for 15 minutes before reaching an outcrop of rock that jutted out over the valley. Jack killed the engine and grabbed binoculars from the glove compartment. "What are we looking for?" Vera asked. Jack didn't answer. He was scanning the horizon with the binoculars, his expression growing darker with each passing second. Finally he lowered them and handed them to Vera. "Look upstream. About 10 miles. Tell me what you see." Vera raised the binoculars, adjusted the focus, scanned the valley until she saw what Jack had seen. Water. A massive amount of water. Not a creek anymore. A river. Brown and churning and carrying debris. Trees. Boulders. Entire sections of hillside torn away by the force. And it was all flowing toward Copper Ridge. "Oh my God," Vera whispered. The upper basin must have gotten hit with a massive rainstorm, plus early snowmelt from those warm days last week. All that water coming down at once. Jack's voice was tight. "And Copper Ridge sits right in the path." Vera lowered the binoculars. Her medical mind was already calculating. Population 847, mostly older residents, many with limited mobility, homes built in a floodplain because land was cheap. "When will it hit?" she asked. Jack checked his watch, looked at the water's speed, did mental calculations. 6 hours, maybe less if there's more water coming. We have to warn them. They won't listen to me, Vera. You know that. Then they'll listen to me. She grabbed his arm. "Jack, there are children in that town. Families. We can't just let them—" "I know." Jack's jaw was set. "Get in. We're going to try." They drove back down the mountain faster than was safe. The truck bounced over ruts and rocks. Vera held onto the door handle and watched the creek through her window. It was rising, visibly rising. Minute by minute, the water climbed higher up the banks. By the time they reached Copper Ridge, the sun was getting low. Golden hour light painting everything in warm tones that would have been beautiful if Vera's heart wasn't hammering with urgency. Main Street was quiet. A handful of people going about their evening routines, closing shops, heading home for dinner. Normal life in a town that had no idea it was about to be erased. Jack parked in front of the town hall and climbed out. Vera followed. Helen Dorset, the mayor, was locking the door. She turned when she heard footsteps, and her expression soured when she saw who it was. "We're closed," she said. "There's a flood coming," Jack said without preamble. "The creek is rising. In about 5 or 6 hours this town is going to be underwater. You need to evacuate now." Helen stared at him. Then she laughed, actually laughed. "A flood? You're telling me there's a flood coming?" "I'm telling you I just saw a wall of water 10 miles upstream that's going to hit this valley like a freight train. You need to get people to high ground. And I'm supposed to believe you because I'm telling you the truth." Ruth Palmer emerged from the general store drawn by the commotion. Ethan Kramer came out of the mechanic's shop. Within minutes, a small crowd had gathered. Jack tried again. "Listen to me, all of you. The upper basin got heavy rain. The snowpack is melting early. All that water is coming downstream. This town sits in a flood plain. When that water hits, we'll all drown. Is that it?" Ethan's voice was thick with sarcasm. "And you just happened to notice this. I know how to read water levels. I know what flooding looks like. And I know this town has maybe 6 hours before what, Reeves?" Helen crossed her arms. "Before you finish scaring us into abandoning our homes so you can loot them? Is that the plan?" Vera stepped forward. "This isn't a trick. I'm a doctor. I deal in evidence and data. We saw the creek levels. We saw the water upstream. This is real." "You're a wife of a debt collector," Ruth said dismissively. "What do you know about hydrology? I know how to read patterns. I know how to assess risk. And I know that in 6 hours everyone in this town could be dead if you don't listen." "Convenient," Ethan said. "Real convenient that Jack Reeves suddenly cares about our safety." The crowd was growing larger. More faces. More skepticism. Vera could feel the hostility like a physical force. She made a decision. The kind of decision that couldn't be unmade. "My name is Vera Montgomery," she said clearly. "I'm a thoracic surgeon, Johns Hopkins Medical School, 10 years trauma experience. I'm wanted by the FBI for murder, and I'm telling you that in 6 hours this town will be underwater." The silence was absolute. Stunned. Then chaos. "She's the fugitive," someone shouted. "The one the FBI was looking for." "She's a criminal," Ruth said, backing away. Helen's face had gone pale. "You lied. You both lied." "Yes," Vera said. "We lied. Because I was running for my life from charges I didn't deserve. But that doesn't change the facts. The creek is rising 12 inches per hour. At this rate, by dawn, Main Street will be 10 feet underwater." "Why should we believe anything you say?" Helen demanded. "You're a liar and a fugitive and a doctor who's trying to save your lives." Vera's voice cracked with frustration. "Look at the creek. Go look at it right now. See for yourself. Then tell me I'm lying." A few people actually went to look, came back with worried expressions. "It is higher than normal," one man admitted. "Higher doesn't mean flood," Ethan argued. "Could just be runoff from the rain." "In 6 hours you'll know for sure," Jack said. "Question is, are you willing to bet your children's lives on being right?" That struck a chord. A few faces showed uncertainty, but not enough. Helen straightened her shoulders. "This meeting is over. Miss Montgomery, you should know that I'm calling the FBI the moment I get inside. And Mr. Reeves, you can expect charges for harboring a fugitive." She turned and walked into the town hall. The crowd began to disperse, muttering, but a few stayed behind. Sarah Chen, the young schoolteacher Vera had seen around town, maybe 28. Kind eyes. "I'll evacuate my students," she said quietly, "just in case. Pastor Reynolds, the elderly minister, I'll open the church on the hill. Anyone who wants to shelter there is welcome." And surprisingly, Margaret Carmichael. "I'll help spread the word, quietly, to people who might listen." It wasn't everyone, but it was something. Outside the town hall, Vera felt Jack's hand on her arm. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Reveal yourself." "Yes, I did. They needed to know I'm serious, that this isn't a game. And now the FBI knows where you are." Vera looked at the creek, at the water that wouldn't stop rising. "Then I guess we'd better make sure people survive the flood before I get arrested." They spent the next hours doing what they could, knocking on doors, warning anyone who would listen, helping Sarah Chen move school supplies to the church, bringing elderly residents who couldn't walk to higher ground, Some people listened. Most didn't. By the time full dark fell, maybe 50 people had evacuated to the church on the hill. The rest, nearly 800 souls, stayed in their homes, convinced this was hysteria, convinced Jack Reeves was playing some elaborate trick, convinced they were safe. Vera stood on the church steps watching the town below, lights in windows, smoke from chimneys. Normal evening in Copper Ridge. In the distance, she could hear something, a low rumble, like thunder that didn't stop. "It's coming," Jack said beside her. And then they saw it, a wall of water, dark against the night sky, rising above the tree line like a living thing. Massive, unstoppable, carrying everything in its path. Someone screamed, then everyone was screaming. The flood hit Copper Ridge with the sound of the world ending. Water and debris and destruction crashing into Main Street with the force of 1,000 stampeding horses. Buildings shuddered. Windows exploded. The saloon's false front tore away with a shriek of splintering wood. And then the water was everywhere. Jack was already moving, running toward the truck, grabbing rope and flashlights. "Stay here," he shouted to Vera over the roar. "Like hell." She grabbed a rope. "I'm a doctor. They're going to need me." They ran toward the drowning town together. The water was waist-deep on Main Street and rising fast. Vera waded in the current, trying to tear her legs out from under her. The water was shockingly cold, full of debris that battered her legs. A woman was trapped on a porch water rising past her waist. Vera fought through the current and grabbed her hand. "I've got you. Hold on." She pulled the woman through the water toward higher ground, handed her off to Sarah Chen, who was coordinating rescue efforts from the church steps, then back into the water. A child maybe 6 years old clinging to a fence post, crying, terrified. Vera reached him just as the post started to give way, grabbed him, held him against her chest. "You're safe. I've got you. You're safe." She carried him to the church. His mother was there crying, reaching for him. Back into the water, again and again and again. She lost track of time, lost track of how many people she pulled from the flood, lost track of everything except the next person who needed saving. She saw Jack everywhere, using his truck to block water, creating a temporary dam for evacuation, pulling people from rooftops, breaking down doors to reach families trapped inside. At one point, she saw Ethan Kramer on a roof, the water lapping at his feet. He was staring at the churning flood with the expression of someone who'd realized too late how wrong he'd been. Jack navigated a makeshift raft made from debris toward him. "Give me your hand," Jack shouted. Ethan didn't move. "I'd rather drown than take help from you." Vera was close enough to hear, close enough to scream. "Then you're a coward, Ethan Kramer. Your children are watching from the church. What are you going to teach them that pride is worth dying for?" Ethan's eyes cut to the church hill, to the small figures there, his kids. He reached out. Jack pulled him into the raft. The water kept rising. Vera saw Helen Dorset swept away by the current. Didn't think, just dove. She'd been a strong swimmer once, in another life. Before medical school consumed everything, the skills came back, had to come back. She reached Helen, grabbed her, fought the current. Together they made it to a piece of stable ground. Helen was coughing up water, shaking. "Why did you?" she gasped. "Why did you save me?" "Because that's what doctors do," Vera said simply. The worst was yet to come. The school building partially flooded. Sarah's voice screaming from an upper window. "Help! I have 12 children up here. The stairs are underwater. The building is collapsing." Jack started toward it, but Vera saw the structural damage, saw the way the building was leaning, saw what he couldn't see from his angle. If Jack went in there, the building would collapse on him. "I'll go," she said. "You'll die." "Maybe, but I'm lighter, faster, and I'm a doctor." "Those kids trust doctors." Jack grabbed her arm. His eyes were desperate. "Vera, if I don't come out, tell the FBI the truth, that I died trying to save people, that I was never a murderer." She kissed him, quick, hard. Then she was gone, wading into the building before he could stop her. The water inside was chest-deep and rising. The structure groaned around her. Vera could hear children crying from above. She found a partially collapsed stairway, climbed it using debris as handholds, her surgical precision helping her navigate the destruction. The second floor was a nightmare, water seeping up through floorboards, walls cracking, and 12 terrified children huddled with Sarah in the corner. "We can't get out," Sarah said. "The stairs." "We make our own exit." Vera studied the wall, found the weakest point, used her medical knowledge of anatomy and physics applied to architecture. "Everyone move to this corner. Stay together. Stay quiet." She found a piece of metal debris, began hammering at the wall, creating a hole, making it bigger. The building groaned, shifted. "It's going to collapse," Sarah whispered. "Not yet." Vera kept working. The hole was almost big enough. Water was ankle-deep on the second floor now. Rising. "Go," Vera ordered. "One at a time. Jump to the debris pile below." "It'll hold." Sarah went first, then the children, one by one, brave and terrified and trusting this stranger to save them. 11 down, 1 to go. The last child, a little girl, maybe 7, hesitated at the hole. "I'm scared." "Me too," Vera admitted. "But I'm right behind you, I promise." The girl jumped. Vera started to follow. The building collapsed. She felt the floor drop away, felt water and debris closing over her head, felt the terrible certainty that this was how she died. Then hands. Strong hands. Jack's hands. He dove into the collapsing building and pulled her out. They surfaced together in the churning water, Jack's arm around her waist, both of them gasping for air. "You promised," he said. "You promised to come out." "I did come out." With help. They made it to the church hill, collapsed on the steps. The children were safe. All 12. Sarah was crying and thanking God and hugging each child. The town below was destroyed. Buildings collapsed or severely damaged. Main Street transformed into a river, but the people were alive. Nearly all of them, gathered on the church hill. Wet, traumatized, but breathing. Vera looked around at the faces, saw something she hadn't seen before. They were looking at her and Jack, not with fear or suspicion, but with gratitude. Helen approached slowly, her expensive clothes ruined, her perfect mayor's facade washed away by the flood. "You saved us," she said. "Both of you. After everything her voice broke, after everything we did to you, you still saved us." "We did what needed doing," Jack said. "No." Helen shook her head. "You did more than that. You did what was right, even when we gave you every reason not to." In the distance, sirens, emergency vehicles from neighboring counties responding to reports of the flood. And among them, FBI sedans. Agent Riley climbed out, his eyes finding Vera immediately. "Dr. Montgomery," he called, "you're under arrest." Vera stood, squared her shoulders, walked toward him with her head high. But before Riley could reach her, the townspeople of Copper Ridge did something extraordinary. They formed a line between Vera and the FBI agent. Every single person she'd saved, every person who'd doubted her, every person who'd refused to evacuate. They stood together, a human wall. "You want to arrest her?" Helen said, her voice ringing with authority. "You go through us first." Riley stared at the crowd. "Ma'am, she's wanted for murder." "She saved this town." Margaret Carmichael stepped forward. "I'm a lawyer, retired, and I'll represent Dr. Montgomery, pro bono, because I know what it's like to blame the wrong person for a tragedy." "I'll testify to her character," Sarah said. "She risked her life for my students." "I'll organize a petition," Ruth Palmer added. "Every person here owes her their life." Even Ethan Kramer spoke up. "I'll sign it. Hell, I'll be first in line." Riley looked overwhelmed. "This is a federal investigation." Jack stepped forward, pulled out a thick file folder. "Then investigate this." He handed it to Riley. "Inside, you'll find evidence that Dr. Montgomery was framed, anesthesia logs showing tampering, financial records proving Harrison Whitmore's son stood to inherit $400 million, witness testimony from a nurse who was afraid to come forward, and security footage showing James Whitmore near the anesthesia machine the night his father died." Riley opened the folder, started reading. His expression changed with each page. "How did you get this?" he asked quietly. "I'm a debt collector," Jack said. "I investigate. I verify. I find proof. It's what I do." Vera stared at him. "When did you—" "Every night you slept," Jack said. "I don't sleep much anyway." Riley closed the folder. "This needs to be verified, cross-referenced. But if it's legitimate," he looked at Vera, "Dr. Montgomery, you'll need to come with me. Arraignment, bail hearing. But this changes things, significantly. I understand, Vera said. Jack stepped beside her. I'm going with her. You're not family. Vera and Jack looked at each other. Something passed between them. Understanding. Agreement. Truth. Actually, Vera said, he's my husband, for real this time. Jack took her hand. For real. As dawn broke over the flooded valley, Vera Montgomery climbed into an FBI sedan. Not as a fugitive running from justice, but as a woman walking toward truth, with a town standing behind her, with evidence that might set her free, and with a man who'd believed in her when no one else would. The flood had destroyed Copper Ridge, but it had also washed away the lies and fear and hatred that had poisoned this place. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters. Sometimes the worst disaster reveals the best in people. And sometimes the person everyone fears turns out to be exactly the hero everyone needs. 3 days after the flood waters receded, leaving Copper Ridge half buried in mud and broken dreams, the FBI returned. Vera saw them coming from the clinic's second-story window, the temporary medical station she'd set up, in the only building still structurally sound. She was stitching up a gash on old Pastor Reynolds' forehead, her hands steady, despite the exhaustion that had settled into her bones like lead. She hadn't slept more than 4 hours in the past 72, hadn't stopped moving since she'd pulled that last child from the collapsing school. The federal sedans rolled down Main Street with the same aggressive confidence they'd shown months ago, but this time the town didn't scatter. People stopped what they were doing, rebuilding their homes and businesses, and watched with something harder than fear in their eyes. They'd survived a flood. The FBI no longer seemed quite so terrifying. "They're coming for you," Pastor Reynolds said quietly, watching her face. "I know." Vera tied off the final stitch, her surgeon's precision undiminished by the primitive conditions. "Keep this dry. Change the dressing twice daily. Come back in a week to have the stitches removed." "Will you still be here in a week?" Vera looked out the window again, saw Jack emerging from the ruins of the general store where he'd been helping Warren salvage inventory. Saw the way Jack's eyes found the federal vehicles, then found her in the clinic window. The way his entire body shifted into something ready and protective. "I don't know," she said honestly. The lead agent who stepped out of the first sedan wasn't Riley. Vera descended the clinic stairs to meet her, aware of the town gathering. Not hiding this time, not running away. Standing witness. Jack reached her side before the agent did. Didn't say anything, just stood there close enough that their shoulders almost touched. A silent declaration. The agent approached with 2 others flanking her. She held up a badge with practiced efficiency. "Dr. Vera Montgomery, I'm Special Agent Donna Price, FBI. You're under arrest for the murder of Harrison Whitmore." Vera kept her voice calm, professional, the same tone she used to deliver bad news to families. "I understand." Agent Price's eyebrows rose slightly. Criminals usually ran or fought or at least protested. Vera just stood there with blood on her borrowed surgical scrubs and exhaustion in her eyes. "You understand?" Price repeated. "Just like that. Just like that. Most fugitives don't make it this easy." "I'm not most fugitives," Vera said. "I'm a doctor who's been running from a crime I didn't commit, and I'm tired of running." Price studied her for a long moment, then reached for handcuffs. "Turn around, please." That's when Jack stepped forward. "Wait," he said, not loud. Not aggressive, just firm. "Before you take her, there's something you need to see." He pulled a thick folder from inside his jacket. The edges were worn from handling the pages, dog-eared and marked with colored tabs. The folder of someone who'd spent countless hours organizing evidence. "I'm a debt collector," Jack said, meeting Price's eyes. "My entire career has been about documentation, building cases that hold up in court. When Dr. Montgomery told me she was framed, I applied those same skills to prove her innocence." Price's hand dropped from the handcuffs. "What kind of evidence?" Jack opened the folder and began laying documents on the hood of the nearest FBI sedan with the methodical precision of someone building an unassailable case. "Anesthesia logs from the surgery. Original copies, not the ones submitted to the police. You'll notice discrepancies in the dosage timing. Someone altered the official records. He laid down another document. Financial records showing that Harrison Whitmore's son James stood to inherit $400 million upon his father's death. But only if Harrison died before making changes to his will, which he'd scheduled to do the following week. James would have been written out entirely. Another document. Witness testimony from Nurse Catherine Wells, surgical nurse present during the operation. She was afraid to come forward initially because James Whitmore threatened her family. But she's willing to testify now, states clearly that she saw James near the anesthesia equipment approximately 15 minutes before surgery. Price picked up the anesthesia log, scanning them with increasing interest. Jack continued, "Security footage from the hospital. I obtained it through legal channels, mostly by tracking down the private security company and explaining that withholding evidence in a murder investigation might impact their business license renewal." He laid down the final piece, a USB drive. The footage shows James Whitmore entering the pre-op area when he shouldn't have been there, shows him at the anesthesia cart, shows him leaving, all time-stamped and authenticated. Price took the USB drive, turned it over in her hands. "How did you get all this?" "I'm very good at my job," Jack said. "Plain gold band." "This is—" Price looked at Vera, then back at the evidence. "This doesn't automatically exonerate her. It needs to be verified, cross-referenced, submitted through proper channels." "I understand that," Jack said, "but it raises reasonable doubt, and reasonable doubt means she shouldn't be in handcuffs." Before Price could respond, someone else stepped forward from the crowd. Margaret Carmichael, the woman whose husband had shot Jack months ago, the woman whose son had died in a car accident that Jack had supposedly caused. She wore mud-stained clothes from days of flood recovery, but her voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades in courtrooms. "I'm an attorney," Margaret said. "Retired, but still licensed. I'll represent Dr. Montgomery, pro bono." Price stared at her. "You're offering to defend the woman who saved my husband's life 3 days ago," Margaret said firmly, "who pulled my neighbors from drowning, who's been stitching up injuries and treating infections without asking for payment or recognition. Yes, I'm offering to defend her." Helen Dorset, the mayor, who'd been the first to condemn both Jack and Vera, stepped forward next. "I'm the mayor of Copper Ridge. I'll testify to Dr. Montgomery's character. She saved this town, saved my life personally when I was swept away by the current." Sarah Chen, the young schoolteacher, joined them. "I'll organize a petition. Every person she saved, every parent of every child she rescued from that school, will all testify." Ethan Kramer, the mechanic who'd blamed Jack for his brother's death, moved through the crowd. He looked uncomfortable, but determined. "I'll sign it. She saved me when I didn't deserve saving, when I'd told her I'd rather drown than accept help from her husband." One by one, townspeople stepped forward. Ruth Palmer from the general store, Pastor Reynolds with his newly stitched forehead, Thomas Carmichael still limping from his weak arm, families with children, old men and young women, the entire town forming a wall of witnesses. Agent Price looked around at the unified crowd, then back at the evidence spread across her sedan's hood. Vera could see the calculation happening behind those calculating gaze, the weighing of political pressure against duty of evidence, against convenience. "Dr. Montgomery," Price said finally, "you'll need to come with me. There'll be an arraignment, a bail hearing. This evidence will be submitted to the district attorney, but I'm not putting you in handcuffs." Relief flooded through Vera so suddenly her knees nearly buckled. Jack's hand found hers, steadying her. "Thank you," Vera said. "Don't thank me yet. This is a long way from over." Price began gathering the documents. "But for what it's worth, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've learned to recognize the difference between guilty people and unlucky ones." She met Vera's eyes. "You strike me as unlucky." "She is," Jack said, "but her luck's changing." Price almost smiled. "We'll see about that." Then she paused, looking at Jack and Vera's joined hands, the way they stood together like soldiers who'd survived a war. "One more thing," Price said. "Are you two actually married, or was that part of the cover story?" Jack and Vera looked at each other, a long look that held months of shared danger nights of fear, moments of hope, and the slow, inevitable fall into something neither of them had planned. "We are," Vera said. "For real this time," Jack added. Price nodded slowly. Then I'm adding conjugal visit privileges to your bail conditions. You're going to need each other before this is over." She gestured to her vehicle. "Let's go, Dr. Montgomery. We have a long drive ahead of us." Vera turned to Jack. He cupped her face in his scarred hands, the same hands that had pulled drowning people from floodwaters, the same hands that had held her through nightmares about Harrison Whitmore's death. "I'll be right behind you," he said quietly. "Every mile, every minute, however long it takes." "I know," Vera said. She kissed him there in the muddy street with the FBI watching and the town bearing witness. A kiss that tasted like floodwater and hope and the bitter sweetness of truth finally coming to light. Then she got into the federal sedan and let them take her away. But this time, she wasn't running. This time, she was fighting back. The trial of James Whitmore began 3 months later in Denver. Vera sat in a holding cell in the county jail, wearing the orange jumpsuit of the accused, watching television coverage of the proceedings on a small screen bolted to the wall. She'd been denied bail initially, the prosecutor arguing flight risk, but Margaret Carmichael had appealed and won, securing her release pending trial. Except Vera had chosen to stay in custody. "Optics," Margaret had explained during a late-night strategy session. "You staying in jail facing the charges head-on, refusing special treatment that tells the jury you're not afraid, that you're ready to let the truth come out." So Vera endured the bland food, the hard cot, the constant noise of other inmates, the guards who looked at her with everything from sympathy to suspicion. But she wasn't alone. Jack visited every day, drove 2 hours each way from Copper Ridge just to sit with her for the allowed hour, separated by bulletproof glass, talking through phones that made his voice sound tinny and distant. They talked about everything and nothing. About the town rebuilding, slowly rising from the flood's destruction. About the people who stopped by Jack's cabin to bring food or offer help, the same people who'd crossed the street to avoid him months ago. About the future they were trying to build from the wreckage of their pasts. "Margaret thinks it's going well," Jack said during one visit 2 weeks into the trial. The anesthesia expert confirmed tampering. The nurse's testimony was solid, and the security footage they tried to claim it was inadmissible, but the judge allowed it. "What about James?" Vera asked. "Smug, right up until they played his phone call to the security company, trying to bribe them to delete the footage." Jack's smile was grim. You could hear his lawyer die inside. Vera pressed her hand against the glass. Jack matched it on the other side, palm to palm, with only bulletproof plastic between them. "I miss you," she said quietly. "I miss you too. But this is almost over." "Is it?" Vera's voice cracked despite her attempt at control. "What if the jury doesn't believe it? What if they decide it's easier to blame the doctor than the billionaire's son?" "Then we appeal," Jack said firmly. "And we keep appealing, and we keep fighting, for as long as it takes. You didn't sign up for this." "Yes, I did. The moment I put that ring on your finger." Vera looked at her hand. They'd taken the ring when she was processed into custody. It sat in a property envelope somewhere, waiting to be returned when she was released. If she was released. "Tell me something good," she said, needing to hear about life beyond these walls. "Tell me about Copper Ridge." Jack's expression softened. "The church is rebuilt. Pastor Reynolds held the first service yesterday. Half the town showed up. They prayed for you." "They prayed for me." Vera repeated, something breaking open in her chest. "The same town that wanted me gone." "People change," Jack said. "You showed them it was possible, by choosing to stay, by choosing to help even when they didn't deserve it." A guard appeared behind Vera. "Time's up." "Already?" Vera checked the clock. An hour had passed in what felt like minutes. "I'll be back tomorrow," Jack promised. "Same time." "I'll be here," Vera said, attempting humor. "Not like I have other plans." She watched him walk away, his shoulders straight, his stride purposeful. The man the whole town had feared, walking through a county jail to visit his fugitive wife and not caring who saw or what they thought. That night, alone in her cell, Vera dreamed of the flood, of water rising and children screaming, and the terrible choice between saving herself and saving others. She woke, gasping, her jumpsuit soaked with sweat. But this time, when the guard did rounds, Vera didn't hide the tears. "Nightmare?" the guard asked. Her name was Officer Martinez, and unlike some of the others, she treated inmates like humans. Memory, Vera said. The flood, I saw the footage. What you did pulling those kids out. Martinez hesitated, then added quietly, My sister lives in Copper Ridge. You saved her daughter. Vera looked up, surprised. Just thought you should know, Martinez said. Not everyone thinks you're guilty. She moved on, leaving Vera staring at the concrete ceiling, thinking about connections and consequences and the strange ways that lives intersected. The verdict came down on a gray Tuesday in late autumn. Vera stood beside Margaret in the courtroom, hands clasped in front of her, trying to breathe normally while the jury filed in. 12 faces, impossible to read. Behind her, she could feel the weight of everyone who'd come. Jack, of course, in the front row. And behind him, impossibly a contingent from Copper Ridge, Helen and Sarah and Ethan. Thomas and Margaret Carmichael, Ruth Palmer, Pastor Reynolds, even Sheriff Donnelly. They'd driven 2 hours to be there, to bear witness. The foreman stood, an older man, maybe 65, with kind eyes and weathered hands. Someone who looked like he'd worked hard his whole life and knew the difference between truth and lies. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. In the case of the People versus Vera Montgomery on the charge of murder in the first degree, how do you find? The courtroom held its breath. Not guilty. The words landed like a thunderclap. Vera's knees buckled. Margaret caught her arm strong and sure. On the charge of criminally negligent homicide, how do you find? Not guilty. Behind her, someone started crying. Vera turned and saw Sarah Chen, tears streaming down her face, holding Ruth Palmer's hand. The judge was still speaking formal words about dismissal and release, but Vera could barely hear over the rushing in her ears. Not guilty, not a murderer, not the monster the world had called her, just a doctor who'd tried to save a life and lost. Margaret was hugging her, saying something Vera couldn't process. Then Jack was there, somehow having crossed the barrier between gallery and defendant's table, gathering her into his arms and holding her so tight she could barely breathe. It's over, he said against her hair. It's over. But it wasn't over. Not quite. Because across the courtroom, federal agents were arresting James Whitmore, reading him his rights while he shouted about lawyers and money and injustice. The entitled rage of someone who'd believed himself untouchable, finally learning the bitter truth that some crimes couldn't be bought away. The prosecutor who'd fought so hard to convict Vera approached his expression carefully, neutral. Dr. Montgomery, I owe you an apology. We were wrong. The evidence was compelling at the time, but we should have investigated more thoroughly. Vera met his eyes. You were doing your job. James Whitmore is very good at making himself look innocent. Nevertheless. The prosecutor hesitated. For what it's worth, I'm glad justice was served, even if it wasn't the justice I'd anticipated. He walked away, leaving Vera standing in the courtroom that had almost destroyed her, surrounded by people who'd chosen to believe in her when belief seemed impossible. Outside on the courthouse steps, reporters swarmed like locusts. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward, questions shouted from every direction. Dr. Montgomery, how does it feel to be exonerated? Will you be suing James Whitmore? What's next for you? Margaret and Jack formed a protective barrier, but Vera stepped forward. She had something to say, something the world needed to hear. I'm grateful, she said, her surgeon's voice carrying even without a microphone. Grateful for the jury's wisdom, grateful for the investigators who found the truth, grateful for everyone who stood by me when I had nothing but my word. What will you do now? A reporter called out. Vera looked at Jack, looked at the contingent from Copper Ridge standing behind him, at the town that had rejected her, then accepted her, then fought for her. I'm going home, she said, understated white dress. Where's home? The reporter pressed. Vera smiled. A town called Copper Ridge. They need a doctor. The media frenzy that followed was predictable. National coverage of the surgeon wrongly accused the billionaire's son, arrested the small mountain town that rallied around an outsider. Vera's face appeared on news programs and magazine covers, always with that same photo from the courthouse steps, Jack's hand in hers, determination in her eyes. But Vera barely paid attention to any of it. She was too busy going home. The town threw her a welcome-back celebration that was half party, half town hall meeting. They'd voted, Helen explained, on 2 proposals. first creating an official town doctor position with salary funded by the county and supplemented by whatever fees patients could afford to pay. Second, renovating the old clinic building into a proper medical facility, complete with examination rooms, a small surgical suite, and living quarters upstairs. "We took a collection," Helen said, her voice thick with emotion. "Everyone gave what they could. It's not much, but it's a start." She handed Vera an envelope. Inside was a deed to the clinic property and a check for $30,000. Vera's eyes blurred with tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll stay," Ruth Palmer said. "Say you'll be our doctor. Say you'll forgive us for being fools who judged you before we knew you." Vera looked around at the faces gathered in the rebuilt church basement. These people who'd feared her, then needed her, then fought for her. These imperfect, complicated, beautifully human people who'd learned the same hard lesson she had, that redemption wasn't given freely, it was earned through the daily choice to be better. "I'll stay," Vera said, "and there's nothing to forgive. We all make mistakes. We all deserve second chances." That night, Jack found her sitting on the porch of his cabin, their cabin now watching the stars emerge over the mountains. "Thinking?" he asked, settling beside her. "About how strange life is. 6 months ago I was running for my life, and now I'm home." "Home," Jack repeated, testing the word. "Is that what this is? Isn't it?" He looked at her, really looked, in the way he had since that first day when she'd stepped in front of his truck with nothing but desperation and courage. "Yeah," he said, "it is." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from shared survival and earned trust. "I did something," Jack said eventually. "Wasn't sure if I should tell you or just show you, but figured you deserved to know." "Know what?" He pulled out his leather notebook, the one filled with debt collection contracts, the one that had been his life's work for more than a decade. And he dropped it into the wood stove. Vera watched it burn flames, consuming pages of names and amounts and payment schedules. "Jack, what? I'm done," he said, delicate silver chain. "Done collecting debts. Done being the person everyone fears. Done living like I owe the world something for the sin of surviving. But that's your job, your income. How will you—" Margaret offered me a position, helping people negotiate debts fairly, advocating for families dealing with predatory lenders, legal work helping people instead of terrifying them. He smiled crooked and uncertain. "Turns out I'm pretty good at reading contracts and finding loopholes. Might as well use those skills for something honest." Vera took his hand, scarred and calloused and strong. "You've always been honest, just in a way people didn't like. Maybe it's time to find a new way." The notebook burned completely, ashes drifting up the chimney like released souls. "No regrets?" Vera asked. "Only one," Jack said. "That it took me so long to figure out there was another path." They sat watching the fire until it burned down to embers, and Vera thought about transformations and second chances and the strange alchemy that turned strangers into family. The wedding happened 6 months later on the first warm day of spring. Not a big production, not the kind of event that gets covered by magazines or live-streamed to thousands. Just a small ceremony in the rebuilt church with the whole town present, because in Copper Ridge the whole town was family now. Vera wore a simple white dress that Helen and Ruth had sewn together, combining their skills to create something elegant and practical. No veil, no train, just clean lines and honest beauty. Jack wore a suit that Thomas Carmichael had altered to fit the first suit he'd worn since his mother's funeral years ago. They stood before Pastor Reynolds while afternoon light streamed through the new stained glass windows, casting rainbows across the wooden pews. "Marriage," the pastor said, his voice carrying the weight of 70 years of wisdom, "is a commitment made not in the easy times, but in the hard ones. These two have already weathered storms that would break most people, flood and fire, accusation and exile. They've been tested in ways most of us never will be." He looked at Jack and Vera with genuine affection. "And they're still standing, together. That tells me everything I need to know about the strength of their bond." The vows came next. They'd written their own, Jack laboring over his for days, with the same intensity he'd once brought to debt collection. "Vera," Jack said, his voice rough with emotion, "I promise to collect the good days and write off the bad. to investigate every problem until we find solutions, to believe you even when the world doesn't, and to always be the home you come back to. Vera's turn. She'd practiced these words until they were perfect, until they captured everything she felt but could never quite say in casual conversation. Jack, I promise to stitch up your wounds, both the ones I can see and the ones I can't, to operate on our problems with surgical precision, to give you what you gave me, a second chance at life, and to choose you every single day, not because I have to, but because I want to. Pastor Reynolds pronounced them married husband and wife in truth now, rather than convenience. And when Jack kissed her, the church erupted in applause and cheers, the sound of a community celebrating not just a wedding, but their own transformation from judgment to acceptance. The reception took place in Thomas Carmichael's rebuilt barn, decorated with wildflowers and string lights and the simple beauty of people who valued substance over show. There was food, a potluck spread that somehow captured the entire town's personality. Ruth's famous apple pie, Sarah's Korean barbecue, a nod to her heritage, Helen's pot roast cooked low and slow the way her grandmother had taught her. Even Ethan contributed grilling steaks with the same attention to detail he brought to engine repair. And there was dancing. Jack and Vera's first dance was to an old country song about second chances and new beginnings, played on a sound system that crackled with age, but carried the melody true. You know, Vera said as they swayed together, we never actually dated. We went straight from strangers to fugitive and accomplice to married. Seemed efficient, Jack said, almost smiling. Skip all the awkward dinner conversations and movie disagreements. Very efficient. Very us. We're good at efficiency. We're better at survival. That too. They danced while the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose and purple. Around them, the town celebrated barriers broken down, old wounds beginning to heal. Ethan approached during a break in the music, looking uncomfortable but determined. Jack, I need to say something. Been practicing for weeks, so just let me get it out. Jack nodded, waiting. I blamed you for my brother's death. Spent 2 years hating you, telling everyone you were a monster, wishing you'd leave town. And all that time I knew. Knew it wasn't your fault. Knew Danny made his own choices. Knew I was using you as a target for grief I couldn't handle. Ethan's voice cracked. I'm sorry. For the hate. For the lies. For shooting at you that one time when I was drunk and stupid. You had every right to press charges and you didn't. You just kept being the bigger man while I kept being small. Jack extended his hand. Your brother's death wasn't your fault either. Sometimes tragedy just happens, and we all need someone to blame to make sense of it. I'm sorry I couldn't save him. Ethan took the offered hand, shook it firmly. You saved me, though, in the flood and after. Showed me that forgiveness is possible, that carrying hate just makes you a pack mule for pain you don't need to carry. They shook hands like men sealing a pact, and Vera saw the weight of years fall away from both their faces. The music shifted to a slower song. Couples paired off on the dance floor. Then Thomas Carmichael stood from his table and clinked his glass with a spoon. The conversation died down. People turned to look. Thomas's face was pale, but determined. Margaret sat beside him, one hand on his shoulder in silent support. I need to say something. Thomas began, his voice carrying across the barn despite its shakiness. About the night I attacked Jack. About why it really happened. The crowd went completely silent. This was the story everyone had whispered about for years, but never truly understood. Jack never told anyone the real reason. He could have. Would have made his life easier. But he kept my secret even when it destroyed his reputation. Thomas took a shaking breath. I'm gay. I was 23 and terrified. Thought if anyone in this town knew, I'd lose everything. My family, my home, everything that mattered. Margaret's hand tightened on his shoulder. Supportive. When he didn't return my feelings, I panicked, lashed out, got drunk and attacked him with a knife because I was more terrified of my own truth than I was of hurting another person. Silence, heavy and complete. That's why he broke my arm, why he left me bleeding. Not because he's violent, because I gave him no choice. And even then, even after I tried to kill him, he never told anyone why, never exposed me. Took the blame and the hate and the fear this town gave him. Thomas's voice cracked. Because that's who Jack Reeves is, someone who protects people, even people who don't deserve it. Margaret stood and wrapped her son in her arms. I've known for 5 years, Tommy, she said loud enough for everyone to hear, and I love you, Nothing changes that. Nothing ever will." For a moment, no one moved. Then Helen stood. "This town has spent too long judging people. We're done with that." Pastor Reynolds stood next. "God loves all his children, including you, Thomas." One by one people rose, not everyone, but enough. A silent declaration that Copper Ridge was choosing acceptance over fear. Thomas looked across the barn at Jack and Vera. "Thank you," he said simply, "for protecting me when I didn't deserve protection." Jack nodded once. Everyone deserves to be safe, especially from their own fear. The moment held then broke as someone started clapping. Others joined, not wild applause, but steady and sincere. Thomas sat down, his mother still holding him, and the wedding celebration continued with something fundamental having shifted in the room. "Prejudice guide my judgment, and I'm prejudice guide my judgment, and I'm ashamed of that." "We all make mistakes," Vera said gently, "some bigger than others. I tried to run you out of town, encouraged others to shun you, and you still risked your life to save mine." Helen's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "What kind of person does that make me?" "Human," Vera said. "Just human. And capable of growth apparently, since you're standing here apologizing." "I want you to know," Helen said, "that as mayor, I'm establishing an annual award, the Montgomery Reeves Community Service Award, for people who put others before themselves, who show us the kind of courage that changes minds and saves lives." "That's not necessary," Jack started. "It absolutely is," Helen interrupted. "Because people need to remember, need to learn, need to know that the strangers we fear might be the heroes we need." Sarah Chen joined them, her students in tow, all dressed in their Sunday best. "We made you something," Sarah said, gesturing to the children. They presented a quilt hand-stitched by the entire elementary school class. Each square featured a different scene: the flood, the rescue, the town rebuilding. And in the center, a square showing Jack and Vera standing together, drawn with the honest simplicity of children who saw heroism where adults had seen only fear. "It's beautiful," Vera said, her voice breaking. "You're beautiful," one little girl said solemnly. "You saved my life. I was in the school when the water came. I was so scared. But you came and got us out." Vera knelt down to the child's level. "What's your name?" "Emma. Emma Kramer, Ethan's daughter." The mechanic who'd hated Jack now watching as Vera hugged his child, the child who wouldn't exist if not for the woman and man he'd tried so hard to drive away. The dancing continued into the night, the celebration outlasting the sunset and stretching into starlight. At some point, Margaret and Thomas Carmichael pulled Jack aside. "We have something for you too," Margaret said. She handed him a folder, legal documents neatly organized. Jack opened it, read, looked up in shock. "This is the deed to the northern pasture land, your family's land." "Was our land," Thomas corrected. "We're giving it to you. 40 acres, good grazing access to the creek. It's yours, free and clear. I can't accept this." "You can, and you will," Margaret said firmly. "You forgave our debt after everything we put you through. Let us forgive ours. The debt of prejudice and hate and attempted murder." "You shot me because you were in pain," Jack said. "That's not a debt." "Then call it a gift. Call it restitution. Call it whatever lets you accept it." Thomas's weathered face was earnest. "But please accept it. Let us do this one thing to make amends." Jack looked at Vera, who nodded slightly. "Okay," he said quietly. "Thank you." They shook hands, these three men who'd been on opposite sides of violence and grief, now finding their way toward something like peace. As the party wound down and guests began departing with promises to see each other soon, Jack and Vera stood alone in the barn's doorway, watching the last stars emerge. "You know what's strange?" Vera said. "I spent my whole career saving lives in emergency rooms, high-tech hospitals with million-dollar equipment, and I'm pretty sure I did more good in Copper Ridge with basic supplies and a lot of improvisation." "Maybe good isn't about the equipment," Jack said. "Maybe it's about showing up, about staying when running would be easier." "Is that what you learned?" "That's what you taught me." They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, the ring on Vera's finger catching moonlight. The same ring Jack's mother had worn, the same ring that had started as a prop and become a promise. Inside the cabin looked different than it had 6 months ago. Still simple, still functional, but warmer somehow. Vera's medical books on the shelves beside Jack's legal texts, her coffee cup next to his at the sink, small evidences of two lives merging into one. "I have something for you," Jack said. He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. "Was going to give it to you earlier, but I wanted it to be just us." Inside the box was a necklace, simple silver chain with a pendant shaped like a bird in flight. "It was my mother's," Jack explained. "She wore it every day. Said it reminded her that no matter how hard life got, you could always choose to rise above it." Vera's eyes filled. "Jack, I can't." "You can. She would have liked you, would have loved what you did for this town, for me." He fastened the necklace around her neck. "Besides, you're family now. It belongs with family." Vera touched the pendant, felt its weight settle against her heart. "Thank you," she whispered. They stood there in their cabin, their home, while outside Copper Ridge slept peacefully under a blanket of stars. A town transformed, lives changed, wounds beginning to heal. And for the first time since Harrison Whitmore died on her operating table, Vera felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. Not the erasure of the past, but the courage to build a future anyway. 1 year later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Vera was in the clinic treating a rancher's infected hand when she heard the knock. Not the usual patient knock, tentative and apologetic. This was hesitant, frightened. The knock of someone who wasn't sure they'd be welcome. "Come in," Vera called, finishing the bandage. The door opened to reveal a young woman, maybe 25, with wild eyes and desperate energy. She carried a single backpack and wore clothes that had seen too many days of hard travel. "I need help," the woman said, her voice shaking. "I'm running from people who want to hurt me. I don't have money. I don't have anywhere to go. I heard there was a doctor here who might understand." Vera looked at this stranger, this frightened woman with nowhere left to run, and saw herself 6 months ago. Saw the desperation and the courage it took to ask for help from people you didn't know. She also saw Jack appear in the clinic doorway, alerted by something, patient files in hand. Saw him take in the situation with those pale gray eyes that missed nothing. Their eyes met. A whole conversation happening in silence. "Should we?" "Yes." "Are you sure?" "Yes." "Together, always." Vera turned back to the young woman and smiled. "Come in," she said. "You're safe here. Whatever you're running from, we'll figure it out together." "Really?" The woman's voice broke. "You don't even know me, don't know what I've done." "No," Jack said, moving to stand beside Vera. "But we know what it's like to run, and we know that everyone deserves someone to believe in them." He gestured to the chairs in the waiting area. "Sit down. Tell us your story. We'll see what we can do." The woman collapsed into a chair, relief and exhaustion warring across her features. "What's your name?" Vera asked gently. Rachel Torres." Jack moved to close the clinic door, giving them privacy, but before it shut, he caught Vera's eye. She smiled. Not the smile of someone who'd survived. The smile of someone who'd finally found her purpose. "Tell us your story, Rachel," Vera said. "And then we'll figure out what comes next. Together." Outside, Copper Ridge continued its daily rhythm. The general store opened. Children walked to school. The church bell rang. Life continuing. And in the small clinic on Main Street, 2 people who'd once been strangers sat down to offer another lost soul what they'd been given. A second chance. A safe harbor. A home. The end.